On the 25th of October 2017, a woman boarded a Ryanair flight from Sofia, Bulgaria to Athens, Greece. She had a bodyguard beside her. A federal warrant for her arrest had been issued 13 days earlier. The plane landed in Athens. She walked off it. She never checked into a hotel. She never boarded a connecting flight under her own name. She simply walked out of the airport and disappeared from the face of the earth. Her name is Ruja Ignatova. Her nickname was the Crypto Queen. She had built a fake cryptocurrency called OneCoin, sold it to more than 3.5 million people in over 175 countries, and personally taken in more than $4 billion. 2 years earlier, she had stood on a stage at Wembley Arena in London, the same venue that hosts World Championship boxing, in a red evening gown, in front of thousands of cheering investors, and told them they were about to become millionaires. She is currently on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list, the only woman on it. The reward for information leading to her capture is $5 million. Nobody has seen her since she walked through that airport in Athens. This is the bust farm. Ruja Ignatova was, by almost every measure, exactly the kind of person nobody expects to run a multi-billion-dollar fraud. Born in Bulgaria in 1980, her family emigrated to Germany when she was a child. She excelled academically from the start. She studied at Oxford. She earned a PhD in law from the University of Constance. She worked for several years at the prestigious consulting firm McKinsey. She spoke German, English, and Bulgarian fluently. She had genuine credentials, the kind investors don't expect a con artist to have. In 2014, alongside a business partner named Carl Sebastian Greenwood, she founded a company in Sofia, Bulgaria, called OneCoin. The pitch was simple, and it borrowed heavily from something people had already started to trust: Bitcoin. OneCoin, Ignatova told the world, was going to be the next Bitcoin, bigger, better, and specifically designed to fix Bitcoin's biggest weaknesses. She called it, in her own marketing materials, the Bitcoin killer. There was just one problem. Unlike Bitcoin, OneCoin had no real blockchain, no public ledger, no actual decentralized technology behind it at all. It was, prosecutors would later say, a fraud from the very first day. Here's exactly how you convince 3.5 million people across 175 countries to buy a cryptocurrency that doesn't actually exist. You don't target crypto experts. You target people who have never heard of a blockchain in their life. OneCoin was marketed heavily to what the industry sometimes calls the unbanked working and middle-class families, often in developing countries, with little access to traditional investment products and even less technical understanding of how cryptocurrency was actually supposed to work. The structure was a classic multi-level marketing pyramid. You didn't just buy OneCoin for yourself, you were paid a commission for recruiting other people to buy in beneath you. The more people you recruited, and the more they spent, the more you earned. Commissions could run several levels deep. So a single enthusiastic recruiter sitting near the top of their own small network could earn far more from other people's purchases than from anything they'd invested themselves. This meant OneCoin's own most enthusiastic promoters were often ordinary investors, not paid employees, people who had put in their own life savings and who were now financially motivated to convince their friends, neighbors, and family members to do the same. Carl Greenwood, Ignatova's co-founder, designed much of this marketing machine. Court documents would later describe him as the architect of the multi-level structure that made OneCoin explode in size so quickly. And Ignatova herself was the public face, the charismatic, credentialed, impossible-to-doubt figurehead who gave the entire operation its legitimacy. Here's exactly how OneCoin faked being a real cryptocurrency for years without anyone stopping it. Real cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin run on a blockchain, a public, decentralized ledger where every transaction is recorded and verifiable by anyone in the world. That's the entire point. No central authority controls it. OneCoin had none of that. Instead, OneCoin's coins existed only inside a private, internal database, one that Ignatova's own company controlled completely. There was no public blockchain to check, no independent way to verify that any of it was real, The price of a OneCoin wasn't set by any open market. It was simply whatever number OneCoin's own internal system displayed that day. In practice, this meant the company could show investors any price it wanted, whenever it wanted, because there was no outside mechanism to contradict it. Investors couldn't even freely sell their OneCoin on an open exchange, the way you could with Bitcoin. For years, OneCoin restricted actual trading, funneling investors instead toward its own internal marketplace, a closed system where the only buyers and sellers were other OneCoin investors, and where the illusion of a rising, valuable asset could be maintained indefinitely, as long as new money kept flowing in from new investors to pay out the old ones. This is the same underlying mechanism as almost every scheme we've covered in this series. A number that only exists because the person controlling it says so. And a constant, desperate need for new victims to keep the illusion. By 2016, OneCoin wasn't just a scheme, it was a spectacle. Ignatova staged massive promotional events around the world, and none was bigger than the one at Wembley Arena in London, a venue built for 11,000 people, more commonly used for World Championship boxing and sold-out concerts. She walked onto that stage in a floor-length red gown, to the kind of lighting and production value usually reserved for genuine celebrities. Thousands of investors, many of whom had already put in their savings, cheered as she promised them extraordinary returns. She told the crowd, according to promotional footage from the event, that OneCoin was already bigger than they realized, and that it was only going to keep growing. It was, in hindsight, one of the most elaborate stage performances in the history of financial fraud. A scientifically credentialed, multilingual PhD standing under stadium lighting, selling something that existed only in a spreadsheet her own company controlled. The performance worked. Investment kept flowing in from every continent, and events like this one became recruiting tools in themselves. New investors would leave energized enough to bring in the next round of friends and family. By some estimates, OneCoin was, at its peak, taking in tens of millions of dollars a month. By 2016, journalists and financial regulators in multiple countries had begun asking the questions OneCoin's investors weren't asking. Where was the blockchain? Why couldn't anyone independently verify a single OneCoin transaction? Why did a world-leading cryptocurrency have no presence on any legitimate crypto exchange? And no listing anywhere a real trader could actually check its price. Regulators started moving first. The UK's Financial Conduct Authority issued a public warning about OneCoin. Germany's financial regulator followed with its own alert. Authorities in India, and eventually several other countries, began issuing similar consumer warnings, describing OneCoin as a likely pyramid scheme rather than a legitimate cryptocurrency. Financial journalists went further. Investigative reporters began digging into OneCoin's structure, directly tracing its recruitment payouts, its lack of any verifiable technology, and the personal wealth accumulating around Ignatova and Greenwood, while ordinary investors saw none of the returns they'd been promised. Some of this reporting would later form the basis of a BBC podcast investigation that ran for years, eventually becoming one of the most detailed public records of how the entire scheme actually worked. In the United States, federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York had been building a criminal case throughout this period, largely out of public view. On the 12th of October 2017, Ruja Ignatova was formally charged in connection with the OneCoin fraud scheme, and a federal arrest warrant was issued. Investigators believe, based on the timing of what happened next, that she was tipped off, that the case against her was closing in, that someone, somewhere, had warned her the walls were coming down. 13 days later, she boarded that flight. What we know for certain is limited, and deliberately so. On the 25th of October 2017, Ignatova flew from Sofia to Athens, accompanied by a man believed to have been part of her security detail. Flight records confirm she landed. Airport records show no trace of her leaving through any conventional channel afterward. She did not check into any hotel under her own name. She did not board any documented onward flight as herself. She simply walked out of Athens International Airport and vanished. In the years since, investigators have suggested she may be traveling on forged documents, possibly under a German passport. potentially having altered her physical appearance through cosmetic surgery to avoid recognition. Investigators have produced at least 8 different composite sketches over the years, based on tips from different countries. No 2 of them fully agree with each other. In June 2022, the FBI placed her on its 10 most wanted fugitives list, only the 11th woman in the list's history, which dates back to 1950. The reward for information leading to her arrest started at $100,000. By 2024, as the case remained unsolved, the US government raised that reward to $5 million, among the largest fugitive rewards the FBI has ever offered. As recently as 2024, German state police investigators publicly stated they believe she may be alive, potentially hiding in the United Arab Emirates or South Africa, protected by the same wealth she stole. To date, she has never been found. While Ignatova vanished, the people who built OneCoin alongside her did not get to disappear. Carl Sebastian Greenwood, her co-founder, the architect of OneCoin's marketing machine, who personally earned more than $300 million from the scheme, spent it the way people spend money they never expect to have to explain. 5-star resorts in Brazil, a luxury villa in Thailand, a private plane branded with the OneCoin name that he used to fly around the world promoting the very scheme funding his lifestyle. He posted footage of these trips publicly, seemingly untroubled by the idea that any of it might eventually be used as evidence against him. In 2018, he was arrested at his residence on the island of Koh Samui in Thailand and extradited to the United States to face charges. In September 2023, he was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison and ordered to forfeit $300 million. Mark Scott, an attorney who helped launder OneCoin's proceeds through a network of investment funds, was convicted at trial and sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was ordered to return $392 million. 2 smaller players in the scheme received far lighter treatment. Gilbert Armenta, who had initially cooperated with prosecutors, was ultimately sentenced to 5 years after investigators determined he'd continued committing crimes even after agreeing to cooperate. David Pike, a more minor participant, received only probation. And then there was Ruja's own brother. Konstantin Ignatov rose within OneCoin's leadership after his sister disappeared, effectively becoming the public face of a company whose actual founder had vanished. He was arrested in 2019. Unlike Greenwood, Konstantin chose to cooperate immediately. He met with federal prosecutors for 9 separate proffer sessions before pleading guilty. He testified against Mark Scott for 3 full days in open court. In March 2024, after roughly 5 years of cooperation, a federal judge sentenced him to time served approximately 34 months already spent in custody. No additional prison time. At his sentencing, Konstantin Ignatov spoke directly to the court. His words, "I can only blame myself. I still have trouble looking into my own eyes in the mirror." His sister has never spoken a word publicly to anyone since the moment she walked through that airport. Every case in this series eventually asks the same underlying question. How did so many people get fooled by something so obviously hollow once you actually look at it closely? OneCoin's answer is uncomfortable because it doesn't rely on Silicon Valley sophistication or Wall Street complexity. It relied on something much simpler, choosing victims who were least equipped to catch the lie. Compare this to almost every other scheme we've covered. Sequoia Capital had analysts and lawyers whose entire job was catching exactly this kind of risk. They were fooled anyway, but at least the tools to catch it existed around them. Theranos' investors included board members with genuine business experience, even if none of them asked the right medical questions. In almost every case, there was at least some infrastructure of expertise surrounding the victims, even when that infrastructure failed. OneCoin skipped that problem entirely. By deliberately targeting people unfamiliar with how real cryptocurrency actually works, people drawn in specifically because they didn't understand blockchain technology. Not despite it, Ignatova built a fraud that was, in a sense, self-protecting. The very knowledge gap that made her victims vulnerable also made it harder for them to recognize what was happening to them, even as it happened. There was no skeptical analyst in the room. There was no one asking to see the blockchain, because most of the room didn't know blockchains were something you could ask to see. And Ignatova's own credentials made this worse, not better. A woman with a PhD in law, fluent in 3 languages, standing on a stage built for world champions, wasn't just charismatic, she was, on paper, exactly the kind of person a financially unsophisticated investor is taught to trust. Her education wasn't incidental to the fraud, it was one of her most effective tools. More than 3.5 million people, across 175 countries, trusted a credentialed, articulate, seemingly legitimate woman standing in front of a crowd because everything about her signaled exactly the opposite of what she actually was. Her business partner is serving 20 years. Her brother spent nearly 3 years in custody and now lives with what he's called an inability to look himself in the mirror. Ruja Ignatova has never faced a courtroom, never answered a single question under oath, and as far as anyone officially knows is still out there somewhere, protected by $4 billion that never should have been hers to take. The money always leaves a trail. Sometimes, the person at the very center of it simply walks out of an airport, and the trail runs cold. Follow the bust files. Because somewhere right now, someone else is building a following they know is built on nothing, and planning their own exit before anyone notices. $4 billion. 3.5 million victims. One woman who simply vanished. $5 million, still waiting for anyone who can find her. Subscribe, new case file every week. The Bust Files. The money always leaves a trail. We just follow it.